Hari Om. Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya madhyamam Asmadacharya paryantam Vande Guru paramparam Shruti smriti purananam Alayam karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Hari Om everybody. Today we are going to talk about free will in Vedanta. The idea of free will with specific reference to Vedanta in general. I'm not getting into the different aspects of Vedanta like Advaita or Vishishta Advaita. But generally, when you take Vedanta as a whole, what is the overall outlook towards the idea of free will? The debate between the determinists who believe in fate and the libertarians who believe in free will has been on for centuries. Of late, of course, the determinists have strengthened their muscles by way of a lot of inputs that have come from biosciences, advances in neurology, biopsychology, etc., as well as in the research in the areas of cognition and mind. However, as far as Indian philosophy is concerned, Indian darshanas are concerned, free will has been central not only to the orthodox philosophy, the orthodox darshanas like Mimamsa, Purva Mimamsa, Uttara Mimamsa, Sankhya, Yoga. Even the heterodox darshanas like Buddha and Jaini philosophies talk about one single most important objective of mankind, that of nirvana, moksha, self-realization, whatever you may call it, that has been accepted as the most important objective of the mankind. We would look at the idea of free will from this particular perspective. The idea of Purushartha has been emphasized all along, all through these centuries. Purushartha, the aims of man. What ought to be the objectives? What does the man seek? Within this context, when you look at the idea of free will, it is very clear that the concept is central to the Indian philosophy, Indian culture, the Indian psyche, and of course, free will is central to Vedanta as well. Not only central to Vedanta, it is critical for the attainment of the Nishreyasa, the most ideal objective that the man can set for himself. Fortunately for us, we know that the idea of free will is universal. It is not outside the purview of the determinants as well. Because as much as we do, the determinants, the people who believe in fate, also set their objectives, put in their efforts, and expect an outcome. If we expect an outcome, it means that we are not totally relying on fate, which means that we have not left everything, whether we are determinants or people who believe in free will, we have not left everything entirely to the idea of fate, Prarabdha. This is a very important point. The second point is that my actions, my life, the outcomes of my efforts, everything is controlled by Prarabdha, we admit, but it is not confined to the idea of Prarabdha. Fate does not and cannot have hegemony over everything, every aspect of our life. This is what we are going to look at or look into in this session. Fortunately for us, we do not know in advance what is in store for us. We do not know what does Prarabdha define for us as far as our life is concerned in this birth. Because if I knew what is in store for me, and if I knew that I'm going to be comfortable, I'm going to achieve and get everything as per the fate for me, I would not put enough effort. The productivity would suffer. Likewise, when I know, or if at all I know, that I'm not going to be successful in this pursuit or any pursuit, or overall in life I'm not going to be very, very successful or happy, I will not once again put any effort. No, is it the lack of effort that is going to result in the state that I have come to? Or alternatively, when we look at it, if I put in effort, is there going to be some change? And if there is going to be some change, is it going to impact Prarabdha, or is it going to change anything else? Is it going to impact anything else? Yes, we are under the purview of Prarabdha. Whatever happens to us will be as per the Prarabdha. But whatever effort I put in will have some results. Some results, sometime, somewhere, somehow. Which means that I am creating my future. I may endure what Prarabdha is in store for me, but I am still working towards a concrete future of mine, a certain future. My inputs are going in, and I will certainly have fruition of these activities or actions that I undertake today. Agami karma, kriyamana karma, call it whatever. I am creating, I am impacting my own future. This is what is free will, essentially. The determinists say that we have a limited choice, a forced set of choice on us when we face any situation. Kartum shakyam, akartum shakyam, anyatha kartum shakyam. Which means that I respond to that situation, that stimulus, or I don't act upon it, or I try and choose a different response or a different way of responding to the situation, which is apart from either acting on it or ignoring it entirely. Now, this is not a set of forced choice on me. These choices is what I have. These are the only choices I have. But within these choices, whenever I engage myself upon choosing any of these, I do examine the situation, I deliberate upon it, and I introspect. I look at various outcomes, possible outcomes, just as in management. and choose one of this. Either of this I choose. Which means there has been an effort in terms of choosing one of these so-called forced choices as well. In today's discussion, what we are going to look at is how does Prarabdha and where all does Prarabdha impact us? Are we entirely ruled by fate? Are we confined only to what the fate has in store for us? Or can I do something else which can mitigate the impact of the Prarabdha, dilute its impact, or at least work towards something for the future? Whatever I get, whatever I enjoy, whatever results I get out of my actions are certainly impacted by Prarabdha, but the results, whether in this birth or subsequently or elsewhere, are not confined to Prarabdha. Prarabdha can only look at what is in store for us in this birth, and not the subsequent or latter birth. That itself is a motivation for me. Ultimately, I am creating my future somehow by choosing a particular actions of my choice. Let's look at how Prarabdha impacts us. What all comes under the purview of Prarabdha? What is the strength of the impact of the Prarabdha? Where is it acute and where is it mild? Is every aspect of my life and act controlled by Prarabdha? That is the question we have to look at now. Prarabdha, as we all know, is based on, or it comes out of our Sanchita karma, a sum of all our past actions, but also a significant, or in fact a larger portion of the Kriyamana karma. That is a consolation. In case I have done good work in the last birth, if I had been engaged in the pursuit of yoga in the last birth, even if I have not achieved a certain or desired level in the pursuit of yoga, is that going to have an influence on this birth? Will it impact my choice of actions or the way I look at the possible choices? Bhagavan himself says in Bhagavad Gita, Antakale cha mameva. If you remember me at your last moments, you are certainly going to be benefited. He also asserts in the 6th chapter that even if you have fallen from the path of yoga, I will ensure that you are able to continue from where you have left yoga. I will give you circumstances, the environment, the parentage, the kind of parents. Shuchinam Simantam Gehe. He promises that you will be born in such a family where your yoga will continue to prosper. So the proportion, the part of the Kriyamana yoga of the last birth is very, very critical. Which means the impact of the Sanchita karma, which is of course larger in size, is very less in this birth. That is why we have got a Manushya Yoni. when the Lord takes out and mixes an equal amount of your merits and demerits of your past life, you are granted a Manushya Yoni, and this Manushya Yoni is a Karma Yoni. Here is where you have the right to act, right to work, right to a chosen kind of action, a chosen action in fact. This is the significance of Karma Yoni. So, with the impact of Kriyamana Karma, if it were full of a significant level of good actions and yoga, aimed at yoga, you are definitely going to continue the yoga in this birth. And the Ishvara, the Karmaphala Data, has actually given you a level playing field. In fact, this level playing field is for everybody. Both your merits and demerits have been put together in such a fashion that you get some kind of environment you are put onto. At the same time, you are also equipped with certain factors, certain attributes which can help you counter the impact of the Prarabdha, also counter the impact of the demerits part of your Prarabdha. That is why we call him Karunanidhi. That's why we call him merciful, Dayavan. So he is a very fair person, giving you a level playing field where you are in a position to either flame the vasanas, which is what is working in our present life. Prarabdha works on our life through vasanas. So you can either flame these vasanas or counter them. Swami Chinmaya Anaghananda says, very often he used to say this, what I have is fate, but what I do with what I have is my free will. He further adds, you do not necessarily go with the current. If you are aware, if you have decided by way of some interaction with certain people or satsanga or your past karma, alright. If you are aware that your destination is upstream, you will not go with the stream which is going downstream. So all that you have to do to go upstream is to fix a motor. And this motor is your sharp intellect. And how do you know that your destination is upstream? This is where our culture, our gurus, our sages, and our scriptures come into play. They very clearly specify what kind of goals should a man set for himself. Repeated exposure to these inputs and these stimuli definitely will work on anybody and give at least an opportunity once in a way to look at an option apart from going with the current. This is what I meant when I said level playing field. Of course, exposure to scriptures may be very rare. However, everybody does get an opportunity. I have come across so many people in life who just happen to listen to, for example, Gurudev's talks happening in Oval Maidan in Bombay. They're just passing by and one or two sentences caught their ear and they became curious. Such opportunities, I'm sure, come to everybody. You don't need Prarabdha for these kind of, stimuli to come to you. It is there all across, all over. Goodness is there everywhere as much as evil is. So all of us definitely get exposed to these kind of situations, these kind of stimuli, where we at least get aware of the fact that my destination is different from what this path will take me to today. So all that you have to do is to fix that motor, the sharp intellect. And here is the role of intellect. Intellect, buddhi, has been praised across the scriptures, all across the scriptures, everywhere, whether it is Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita, repeatedly, all over again and again, the importance of a strong, stable buddhi called prajna, a sharp, stable intellect called prajna. The importance of prajna has been emphasized everywhere. And we will now see we are not helpless in the face of Prarabdha entirely. We have looked at one aspect where the Kriyamana karma will at least help us face certain situations which are conducive for our achieving the objectives that we have set for ourselves. The second aspect is that Prarabdha impacts our Ichha Shakti, the three forces that we have, the force of the desire, the force of the intellect, the force of the action. Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti. Prarabdha impacts the Ichha Shakti. The impact is stronger in the case of Ichha Shakti. It has limited role to play in our Kriya Shakti and certainly much more limited role to play in our Jnana Shakti. We will see how that happens, whether this is true really speaking. How does it work? We will look at that. The third aspect or the impact of the Prarabdha is that Prarabdha generally impacts issues or matters that are body related. For example, whether I will be having a fully able body, what kind of family I would be born in, what kind of socio-economic environment I will be having for myself. Anything to do with body, because body, the seed of the body is karma, action. Prarabdha is based on your past action, so it has a role to play predominantly in the areas that are body related, dehadi. It doesn't have control over or purview over the intellect. It doesn't have, because the seeds of buddhi is prajna, which is the Ishvara. So these are two different aspects. Prarabdha does not have control over your buddhi, and I repeat this because I will explain further as to what part of our mind is impacted by Prarabdha and what is not impacted by it. We all in fact know that Prarabdha impacts the vasanas. Through vasanas, Prarabdha impacts our mind. The vasanas play with our mind. Mind is, after all, a flow of thought. And vasanas do not impact our intellect. Yes, our intellect is made up of our thoughts. But we are at an advantageous situation so as to decide what kind of thoughts I would entertain. What kind of thoughts would I accept? What kind of thoughts, out of the 60,000 thoughts that come to my mind every day, What kind of thoughts would I want to come to me? What kind of thoughts I will stick to, linger on to? What kind of thoughts I will flame? This depends upon your buddhi again. But you can work on your buddhi also. Partly depending upon your thoughts and partly by your own effort. A self-effort is very, very critical. Striving is critical in Vedanta, in the attainment of moksha. Unless you strive, you do not achieve your objectives. So the fourth aspect, in fact, of Prarabdha is that we have to understand what can be left to Prarabdha and what cannot be left to Prarabdha. What belongs to Prarabdha is what you have to understand to take this decision. Among the Purushartha, Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha, the first two are called the lower Purushartha, the lower objectives. Artha, the pursuit of wealth. Kama, pursuit of your desires, fulfilling your desires. Now we mentioned that Prarabdha has control over your Artha and Kama, pursuit of wealth or material benefits and fulfillment of your desires. However, if we remember or recall that Dharma is not an individual or a single component of Purushartha. This is very critical for us to understand. Even in the pursuit of these lower objectives of Artha and Kama, we have to enforce Dharma. This is what scriptures teach us. Apart from Dharma Shastra, even the scriptures repeatedly talk about Dharma, the necessity to follow Dharma, the necessity to appreciate the core values of our life. And the higher objectives like Dharma and Moksha are not to be left to Prarabdha because Prarabdha does not have purview over these objectives. So as far as Dharma is concerned, whether it is Dharma in terms of various sadhanas, various activities, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, charity, etc., etc. Also in the areas of Artha and Kama, we will impart Dharma and we will pursue moksha with vigor. Mumukshatvam itself means a zeal for liberation. So Prarabdha will work on the lower objectives and not on the higher objectives, and that is where we have to strive, we have to work. That is left for us. It is our field. Now, we did mention that Prarabdha works through vasanas, and how do vasanas work? Vasanas work through the play of gunas, the qualities, the three qualities, triguna, sattva, rajas, tamas. Vasanas do impact our life, our personality, ourselves entirely, my own being. Which means that depending upon your vasanas, you will have a guna, a quality which is dominant in you. And that dominant quality will define the quality of your life. What you think, what you do, what you encounter, what you get, everything depends on that. However, this is for the entire life. Vasanas do not micromanage your life. They cannot. Because gunas which work with you every moment of your life. In fact, there is nothing in this universe which does not constitute the three gunas. Forget a human being, forget a being like me. Triguna, the three gunas are there in me, they impact me, but they are there in everything that is in this universe. However, we have to understand that these gunas predominate each other continuously. Yes, at certain times we all know that at certain times one guna will be dominant over the other two gunas. For example, early mornings, at the dawn, the sattva guna is very, very dominant. It is in ascendance, it's also dominant, and that is when we get into prayers, positive thoughts, energetic thoughts, we get into sadhanas, japa, etc., etc., so that we are able to extend this period a little more than it would have been possible otherwise. We linger on to the sattvic mode. So when you are on sattvic mode, when the sattva is in ascendance, hold on to it, linger on to it, extend it as much as possible. And subsequently, invariably, rajas will take over. Yes, you need to have rajas too, so that you need to work, you need to get into action. With that attitude, accept rajas and work on it. Even tamas can be accepted. It is accepted by us when we go to sleep. We exhaust our tamogunas considerably in our sleep. So let them play their games. You just have to be aware. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. You be aware of the play of gunas. Because the gunas are the ones which control or which regulate or which determine the kind of thought that you will have, or at least the kind of thought that you will entertain. So once you are aware of the play of these gunas, you are able to direct your mind accordingly. The various permutations and combinations here. But the point is that you are aware of the play of gunas. You're not disturbed by it, but you are aware of it. And you know that they can be regulated. They can be modified. A rajas situation can be converted into a sattvic situation. If you have too much of rajas in you, want to get into activity, get into singing and dancing, sing the Lord's name, make it a little more sattva. So once we know that the play of gunas control or regulate my mind, I bring in my sharp intellect. As we said earlier, we are in a position either to flame the impact of the vasanas or counter them. And this is how it is done, by understanding the play of gunas and working on them all the time. And being on a sattvic mode always empowers your mind. You get more and more sattvic. Every day, weeks over the days, months over the weeks, and years over the month, you consolidate your sattva guna so that it comes back more and more. It comes more often. Often it comes to you and you stay on with it for a longer time. And ultimately, what is your objective here is that you want a sattva dominant nature in you. And it doesn't come, it comes only to certain people. The avatar purushas, for example, are the jnanis. Absolutely sattva dominant is Ishvara. But he also has a bit of the other gunas, we know that. we as human beings are looking at enhancing our sattva. So be more and more sattva dominant to the extent possible. Now, this sattva guna, which lingers on, which gets strengthened, will also guide your actions and your thoughts. And how does this happen? To enable our intellect to work efficiently, we also have to fan the intellect. We have to work on the intellect. We have to support the functioning of the intellect. And how do we do this? We can do this by understanding the components of the sharp intellect. Intellect essentially has three components. The first one among them is purity, nirmalta. Then you have Sukhmata, subtlety. Then finally we have Tivrata or Tikshnata. I would rather use Tivrata, which is what is given in Kathopanishad in this context. So you have Nirmalta, purity, you have subtlety, Tikshnata, and Tivrata, the strength, the power of your mind. Now let's look at each of this so that we know how to strengthen our mind, how to stabilize that strong mind subsequently. Nirmalta can be enhanced by way of engaging in sadhanas, being on the sattvic mode all the time, as much as possible. Striving to be in that mode, engaging ourselves in sadhanas, the various prescribed sadhanas. This will purify our mind. It will remove the impurity, mal. It removes the mal, so it becomes nirmal. And sadhanas repeatedly, consistently and constantly if possible. Japa is something which can be done at any time. There are people I've seen who do japa, who chant for maybe 8 to 10, 12 hours a day. It's not that they aren't working, they are. So achieve nirmalta. And the next one, Sushmata. Sushmata is attained or enhanced by understanding the import of scriptures. For this, of course, we have to listen to the scriptures. Shravanam. And Shravanam itself actually means to listen with the understanding of the import of the scriptures. For this we need a guru. That's why we go to a guru, we go to a satsang, we have study classes. So Shravanam. Shravanam is something which is going to instill sensitivity in you. Subtlety leads to sensitivity. Sensitivity here primarily refers to sensitivity towards our core values or sticking to the core values, or understanding the necessity to stick to the core values, practice those core values. Swami Dayanand Ji used to say, consider the value of values. Let's see how much you value the values. So alongside Shravanam, you have to get into introspection, Mananam, which is equally important in building up the sensitivity, Sushmata, subtlety. As you get into Shravanam, you will have doubts, no doubt, you will have doubts. Samshaya and Viparjaya also. And these get removed only by way of Mananam. The more you introspect, more you understand, and more subtle your intellect grows. And the nuances of what is said in the scriptures comes to you much more easily when your mind is subtle. It is able to impregnate, it is able to disperse into various aspects, various contents, and understand or pick out what is the right thing, what is the import of those inputs. For this you require subtlety. Because whatever is said in scriptures, injunctions and otherwise, very many scriptural statements are very, very subtle. It can be only understood by a very, very subtle mind, a mind which is aesthetic in nature, which is appreciative in nature. The third point, the third component of buddhi is tivrata. Now this is, as you engage yourself in Shravanam and Mananam, you develop an intellectual conviction within you. The intellectual conviction which is helping you, or which will help you to put into practice whatever you have learned and understood and wanted to adopt. Now, this intellectual conviction is the strength of the buddhi. It builds determination in you, determination to stick to the core values, determination to pursue the objective, the higher objectives that you have set yourself. That is why mumukshatva is called a zeal for liberation. Now we have these three components of buddhi, and we know how to work on these. A sharp intellect which becomes stable, which becomes stira prajna, makes you a stita prajna ultimately. A stira buddhi, stira prajna. Stira buddhi is called prajna. A buddhi which is sharp and stable is called prajna. And the Lord has described stita prajna lakshanam in the second chapter of the Gita, very beautiful section. So with the help of the understanding of these components of the buddhi, we will strengthen our buddhi, we will arm our buddhi to counter the impact of the vasanas, the play of the vasana and the gunas, and direct our mind to where we want to go, towards yoga, towards a single-minded pursuit of our objectives. This is what Bhagavan calls in Buddhi Yoga in second chapter of the Gita. He calls it Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, generally called Buddhi Yoga. However, in second chapter he specifies, he gives a specific name for this Buddhi, Vyavasayatmika, singular, focused buddhi. So having achieved this sharp intellect, we would counter the impact of the vasanas and handle the play of the gunas. After all, it is the vasanas which inhibit our progress. It is the gunas which forbid us from what our actions that we would like to get into, or misdirect us, take us away from the path. But a strong and stable intellect is out there with you to counter their misdeeds. And free will is there right from the time that you are aware of your destination being different, being upstream. And throughout this entire effort of achieving those objectives that you have set for yourself, free will is present, invariably present there in every frame of this entire journey. And if free will were not there, injections of the scriptures are futile. In fact, the major injection of the scripture is, after all, the pursuit of Brahman, the achievement of self-realization. The entire content of the scriptures talk about Brahman and knowing the Brahman. And if sharp intellect alone can take us there, we have to work only on that and not worry about the Prarabdha. Let it play its part. That is not going to dissuade us from what we want to do. And I'm sure all of us want to do something good, something better, something shreyas. So, now armed with this sharp intellect, we will continue our journey. Hari Om. But before we close, we will look at a few references. As I said, references for a strong buddhi is there across the scriptures, but we will look at some of the very popular, very common ones now. The most important one being Kathopanishad, chapter 1, section 3, verses 3 to 11, the famous chariot example, where the buddhi, the intellect, has been compared to the charioteer. The charioteer who controls the reins, which is the mind here, and the reins in turn control the five senses, the horses of the chariot. And in the same Upanishad, Kathopanishad, in chapter 3, section 1, 10th verse, talks about the superiority of the sharp intellect, which is of course again mentioned by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, verse number 42. And in Kathopanishad, chapter 1, 12, we have the description of the components of the intellect, particularly the Sushmata and Tivrata. Then of course the Lord talks about, in verse 5 of chapter 6, the famous verse, Udhvaret Atmana Atmanam. You elevate yourself by yourself. You yourself elevate yourself. Atmana Atmanam. That is you elevate your mind by the help of your sharp intellect. Atmana means both the mind and the intellect here, in different context, of course. Then of course the Lord makes the promise of giving you the buddhi, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, in the chapter 10. And in chapter 18, of course, there is again emphasis on Sattvic Buddhi and a Sattvic determination. Sattvic Buddhi determines what is to be done and what is not to be done. That discrimination, that viveka, comes on account of the Sattvic Buddhi alone. Of course, Vairagya also comes because of that. Then he reinforces this with the following verse number 33 in chapter 18, talks about the Sattvic Dhriti, the determination to pursue your objectives, to pursue Nishreyasa. Hari Om. Thank you.